I poured water into my husband's coffee the morning after I kissed another man, and my hands didn't even shake. That's what terrified me most. Not the guilt, not the shame, but how easily I looked him in the eye and smiled like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't spent the previous night in a stranger's car, crying and laughing and feeling alive in a way I couldn't remember ever feeling before. My husband asked if I slept well. I said yes. He kissed my forehead, and I let him. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 60 years old, and until 3 months ago, I believed my story was already written. Retirement parties, grandchildren on weekends, a husband who falls asleep during movies and forgets to take out the trash, but never forgets our anniversary. Safe, predictable, dead. I didn't know I was dying inside until someone reminded me I was still alive. It started at a community art class, watercolors. My daughter suggested it because I'd been complaining about having too much time since I stopped working. She thought painting would give me purpose. She was right. Just not the way she imagined. He sat across from me the first day. Silver hair, kind eyes, hands that moved across paper like they were telling secrets. When he looked up and smiled, something in my chest cracked open. Not attraction, not yet, just recognition, like my soul had been waiting for someone to see it. His name was Daniel, widower, 2 years alone. He painted the same mountain over and over, different colors each time, and when I asked why, he said he was trying to remember how his wife saw it. They'd hiked it together every anniversary. Now he couldn't climb anymore, but he couldn't let it go either. I understood that. The holding on. The pretending everything was fine when inside you're screaming. We started talking after class. Just coffee at first, innocent, safe. He told me about his marriage, the good parts and the hard parts. I told him about mine. How my husband and I had become roommates who shared a last name. How I couldn't remember the last time he really looked at me. How some days I felt like a ghost in my own house. And if you're still watching, you need to stay until the end. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and who I really was underneath all those years of being good. Daniel never touched me during those first weeks. That's what made it dangerous. Physical attraction I could have resisted, could have walked away from. But this was different. He listened like my words mattered, laughed at my jokes, remembered details about my life that even my own family forgot. He saw me, really saw me. And I hadn't realized how invisible I'd become until someone turned the lights back on. My husband noticed I was happier. He thought it was the painting, told everyone at a family dinner how proud he was that I'd found a hobby. Our daughter beamed. Our son asked to see my work. And I sat there smiling, knowing the real reason I glowed had nothing to do with watercolors and everything to do with a man whose phone number I'd saved under a woman's name. The first time Daniel touched my hand, we were sitting in his car after coffee, rain drumming on the roof. He was talking about his wife's last days, and without thinking, I reached over. His fingers closed around mine. Neither of us pulled away. We sat there for 20 minutes in silence, holding hands like teenagers, and when I finally went home, I cried in my car for an hour. Because I knew. This was the line. Once you cross it, everything changes. I crossed it anyway. Not that day. But the next week when he asked if I wanted to drive to the lake, the one his wife loved, the one from his paintings, I knew what I was saying yes to. Not sex, not an affair, but something deeper, more dangerous. I was saying yes to feeling alive, to mattering, to being wanted. We spent the afternoon by the water, talking, laughing. He pointed out birds I'd never noticed before, told me stories that made my heart hurt and heal at the same time. And when the sun started to set and he looked at me with those eyes that actually saw me, I didn't look away. He kissed me as the last light disappeared. Soft, careful, like I was something precious. And I kissed him back. Not because I didn't love my husband, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be loved like this. Chosen, desired, seen. I drove home in the dark with my heart racing and my mind screaming and something inside me singing for the first time in decades. And then I walked into my house, kissed my husband hello, and asked what he wanted for dinner. You need to understand something. I'm not a bad person. I never cheated before. Never even thought about it. I was the good wife, the good mother, the woman who did everything right and expected nothing in return except to be noticed once in a while. But after 60 years of being invisible, someone finally saw me. And I couldn't make myself look away. Keep watching. Because this is where it gets worse. The guilt came in waves. Some days I'd wake up next to my husband and hate myself so completely I couldn't breathe. Other days I'd text Daniel and feel nothing but joy. I was two people, the faithful wife of 38 years, and the woman who met a widower in parking lots and laughed like she was young again. We never slept together. That's what I told myself made it okay. We were just friends, close friends, friends who kissed, friends who said I love you, friends who made plans for a future that could never exist. But we never crossed that final line, so it wasn't really cheating. That's what I told myself anyway. My husband started asking questions. Nothing direct, just comments. Why was I always on my phone? Where did I go on Tuesday afternoons? Why didn't I seem interested in the vacation he'd been planning? I had answers ready. Good answers. But the lies were piling up, and I knew eventually the weight would crush me. Daniel wanted more, not sex. He'd been clear about that. He wasn't ready. Might never be. But he wanted me to leave. Start over. Build something real instead of stealing moments between my real life. He said we deserved to be happy. That life was too short to waste on people who didn't appreciate us. And God help me, I considered it. I imagined telling my husband, watching his face break, explaining to my children that I was leaving their father for someone I'd known 3 months, becoming the woman everyone would whisper about, the selfish one, the home wrecker. Even though Daniel's home was already wrecked and mine had been empty for years. I played out every scenario, and in most of them, I stayed. Not because it was right, but because I was too afraid to choose myself. Then something happened that made the choice for me. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My husband had a heart attack. Minor, treatable, but terrifying. I got the call while I was with Daniel at the lake, our place. He was reading poetry out loud and I was pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. Then my phone rang and my daughter was crying and everything stopped. I drove to the hospital going 20 over the limit with my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. All I could think was, this is my fault. This is punishment. I was going to lose him because I wanted something for myself. Daniel texted asking if everything was okay. I turned my phone off and didn't turn it back on for 2 days. My husband survived. The doctor said it was a warning. Change his diet, reduce stress, take better care of himself. He held my hand in the hospital bed and said he was sorry for taking me for granted, for forgetting to tell me he loved me, for letting us drift apart. He said he wanted to fix things, go to counseling, remember why we fell in love in the first place. He said losing me would kill him faster than any heart condition ever could. And I sat there nodding and crying and hating myself because all I could think about was Daniel at the lake, alone, wondering why I disappeared. I tried to end it, sent Daniel a text saying we had to stop, that my husband needed me, that I'd made a mistake. He called immediately, said he understood, that he'd always known this day would come. But his voice broke when he said goodbye, and I knew I'd broken something in him that was already shattered. I threw myself into being the perfect wife again. Made healthy meals, went to every doctor's appointment, held my husband's hand during movies even when I wanted to scream, and everyone praised me. Said I was so strong, so devoted, such a good woman. Nobody knew I cried myself to sleep every night. That I still had Daniel's number saved. That some mornings I woke up and forgot which life was real. 3 weeks after my husband came home from the hospital, Daniel showed up at my art class. He shouldn't have. We'd agreed to stay away. But there he was, setting up his paints like nothing had happened. Like we were just classmates again. I should have left. Should have transferred to a different class. But I sat down across from him and picked up my brush and pretended my hands weren't shaking. He painted his mountain. I painted nothing. Just moved colors around until they bled into gray. After class, he waited by my car. Said he needed to see me. Just once. Just to know I was okay. And even though every rational part of my brain screamed no, I got in his car. We drove to the lake. Our lake. Sat in silence watching the water. Finally, he said he couldn't do this anymore. The almost, the maybe, the stolen moments. He said he loved me, but he couldn't keep loving someone who'd never really be his. He needed to let go, for both our sakes. I knew he was right. I even agreed. But when he leaned over to kiss me goodbye one last time, something in me broke. Comment below if you've ever loved two people at once. If you've ever had to choose between what's right and what makes you feel alive. Because I'm about to tell you what I did next, and I need to know I'm not the only one who's been this lost. We didn't just kiss goodbye that day. We held each other and cried and said all the things we'd been too scared to say before. He told me he'd been planning to ask me to move in with him, had already looked at houses, places with gardens and big windows and room for both our ghosts. He said he knew it was crazy, but he couldn't imagine the rest of his life without me in it. And I told him the truth, that I loved him. That leaving my husband would destroy my family, but staying was destroying me. That I didn't know how to choose between the life I'd built and the life I wanted. He said I didn't have to choose today, but eventually I would. And when that day came, he'd be waiting. Then he drove me back to my car and watched me leave. And I went home to my husband who'd made dinner and set the table and smiled like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. That night, I lay awake next to my husband listening to him breathe. Steady. Alive. Trusting. And I realized something that made me sick. I wasn't going to leave, not because staying was right, but because leaving required a kind of courage I didn't have. I'd spent 60 years being the good woman, the one who sacrificed, the one who put everyone else first. I didn't know how to be anything else, even if it killed me. I blocked Daniel's number the next morning. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't explain. Just erased him like he never existed. Because that's what you do when you're not brave enough to choose yourself. You pretend the other option wasn't real. But here's what nobody tells you about making that choice. The wanting doesn't go away. Neither does the regret. You just learn to carry it, like a stone in your chest that gets heavier every year until one day you can't remember what it felt like to breathe without the weight. My husband and I went to counseling, worked on communication, started having date nights again. He tried so hard to make me happy, and I tried so hard to let him. But some part of me was still at that lake, still in Daniel's car, still choosing differently. I never saw Daniel again. Heard through someone at the art class that he moved, sold his house, left town, nobody knew where he went, just that one day he was gone. Part of me was relieved. If he wasn't an option, I couldn't choose wrong. But another part of me died knowing I'd let the last person who really saw me disappear without fighting to keep him. My family thinks I'm fine now. Happy. They joke about my little art phase. My daughter says she's glad I got it out of my system. My husband tells people we're closer than ever, and maybe he even believes it. But I know the truth. I'm a ghost again, smiling and nodding and going through motions. And sometimes late at night, I let myself imagine what would have happened if I'd been braver. If I'd chosen the mountain, the lake, the man who painted his grief and still had room for my joy. I'll never know if it would have worked, if leaving would have been worth it, if I would have regretted it even more than I regret staying. Those are questions I'll carry to my grave. What I do know is this. At 60 years old, I learned that you can love two people, that you can be good and still want something forbidden, that sometimes the right choice feels like dying slowly, and that living half a life is still living, even if part of you is buried at the bottom of a lake you'll never visit again. Make sure you're subscribed, because I need you to tell me something in the comments. Would you have stayed? Or would you have chosen the lake? Because some days I still don't know if I made the right choice, and I'm terrified I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. The worst part isn't the regret. It's the moments when I forget. When my husband makes me laugh or we have a good day, and I think maybe I made the right choice after all. Then I'll see silver hair in a crowd or hear certain music, and it all comes rushing back. The proof that I'm still alive under all this pretending. The reminder of what I gave up to keep the peace. My husband will never know. My children will never know. To everyone who matters, I'm just their wife, their mother, the woman who does everything right. And maybe that has to be enough. But you know now. You know that beneath the smile is a woman who almost chose differently, who touched freedom for 3 months and then let it slip away, who still wakes up sometimes reaching for a hand that isn't there. So tell me in the comments. Tell me I'm not alone. Tell me you understand what it's like to bury the best parts of yourself because the cost of resurrection was too high. Or tell me I'm a coward. Maybe I need to hear that too, because I'm 60 years old and I thought my story was over. Turns out it's just a different kind of ending than I imagined. Not the one I wanted, but the one I chose. And I'll never know if it was right, just that it's done. And I'm still here, still breathing, still wondering what he's painting now, if he ever thinks of me, if he found someone braver, someone who could choose the lake. Hit that subscribe button. Share this if you've ever had to choose between duty and desire. And tell me how you live with whichever one you picked. Because I'm still learning. And some days it's harder than others.